Welcome to Vuln Vibes. We're here to cut through the noise and give you the critical insights you need from the cybersecurity front lines. Today, we're diving deep into something causing, well, significant ripples right now, Apple's recent emergency updates, and more importantly, what they tell us about the escalating zero-day threat landscape impacting their whole ecosystem, especially for those of you managing complex, secure environments. Understanding this is really crucial for looking at that evolving attack surface. So our mission today is kind of twofold. First, we'll really dissect the specifics of this latest critical vulnerability, that CVE-2025-43300. It's a zero-day, and it's actively exploited. Then, we're going to zoom out a bit. We need to connect this to the broader and, frankly, pretty concerning trends in Apple zero days we've seen all year, drawing on the latest threat intel. This isn't just about patching, right? It's understanding the attack vectors, the adversary TTPs, and what this really means for your strategic defense posture.
Exactly. And for our audience, you're all very familiar with the relentless pace here, staying ahead of these attack vectors, navigating the patch cycles. It's not just best practice anymore. It's a strategic imperative. These zero days, they aren't just theoretical flaws. They're direct bypasses of the security controls you have in place. And they often signal, well, highly targeted, advanced, persistent threats. The sheer speed at which these are being found and then weaponized, it really highlights a massive challenge in maintaining robust defenses. Makes you reevaluate trust models, doesn't it?
Okay, so let's unpack this immediate alert then. Apple pushed out emergency updates pretty much across the board, actually, to deal with the zero-day that's, like you said, not theoretical, it's active. We're talking CVE 2025-43300. So for the security teams listening, what is this specific vulnerability, this out-of-bounds write in the ImageIO framework, CVSS 8.8?
Yeah.
What does that practically mean on an Apple device? Potential for RCE, privilege escalation.
Yeah, the critical point here is both what it is an out-of-bounds right and where it is the ImageIO framework. ImageIO isn't some obscure library. It handles, well, almost all image data across iOS, iPadOS, macOS. It's pervasive. Think about it. Every time your device shows an image preview in Messages or loads one in Safari or really renders any visual content, ImageIO is likely involved. That creates this huge, ubiquitous attack surface. Now, an out-of-bounds write, for everyone listening, it's a specific memory safety flaw. Basically, an attacker finds a way to write data outside the memory buffer that was assigned for it. And because ImageIO runs with, significant privileges, pulling this off successfully can corrupt memory. It can often bypass standard mitigations like ASLR and potentially open a direct path to arbitrary code execution, which could mean, full control of the device and the trigger, just viewing or maybe even just receiving a malicious image. It's incredibly potent, very stealthy.
Wow. Okay. And Apple's own statement on this is pretty stark. They said, and I quote, Apple is aware of a report that this issue may have been exploited in an extremely sophisticated attack against specific targeted individuals. That phrasing itself, extremely sophisticated. And specific targeted individuals. That tells us quite a bit, doesn't it? What's your read on the likely actors and their goals here?
Oh, absolutely. That language, extremely sophisticated attack, it points directly towards actors with serious resources and capabilities. We're likely talking well-funded nation-state groups, APTs, maybe those commercial surveillance vendors. These aren't your run-of-the-mill cyber criminals. These are entities investing potentially millions in finding and developing these exploits. They run strategic operations. And when Apple says specific targeted individuals, it just underscores that precision. This isn't spray and pray malware. It's tailored, probably for high-value targets. You know the profile. Journalists, human rights activists, political figures, maybe key corporate execs. The motive is almost always intelligence gathering, espionage, surveillance. The sheer cost demands a high-value return. It's a classic early stage in a sophisticated kill chain, right? Reconnaissance, weaponization, then delivery via something like this image exploit.
Okay, so considering that level of sophistication, let's talk about the attack vector again. Just processing a malicious image just sounds so mundane. For our listeners, we're always trying to balance usability and security. Does this kind of exploit fundamentally change how we need to view seemingly harmless content? Does it challenge our security thinking?
That's a really critical question. The banality of image processing is exactly what makes this so dangerous, so potent. Unlike clicking a dodgy link or opening a weird attachment things, users are getting better at spotting viewing an image. It's routine, almost subconscious. It completely weaponizes user trust or just normal interaction. And it bypasses a lot of traditional defenses. Your perimeter security might scan executables, scripts, but a visual file often sails right through without deep inspection. So it demands a shift. Every piece of content coming in, no matter how harmless it looks, could be a vector. For IT teams, this really means doubling down on things like EDR, endpoint detection and response, maybe enhancing sandboxing, rethinking how content is actually processed by applications, not just blocked at the network edge. It really challenges that assumption of content innocence, forces us to look deeper.
Absolutely. Now, how Apple addressed this, they said the bug was internally discovered and fixed with improved bounds checking. Internally discovered sounds positive, right? Shows Apple's own teams are finding things. But the fact it was already being actively exploited before they found it internally, does that imply a gap? Or maybe just the reality of facing these top-tier adversaries?
That's a very perceptive point. Yeah, internally discovered does highlight Apple's own security capabilities, which are significant. Finding it themselves before, say, a public disclosure, that's definitely a positive. But the caveat is huge. It was actively exploited before they found it. That suggests, yeah, even with strong internal security, their proactive measures didn't catch this specific, highly sophisticated attack before it hit targets. It really speaks volumes about the resources and the stealth of these APT groups. They can often sit on 0 days for a while, deploying them very carefully. For us, it's a stark reminder, even with the best vendor security, that window of exploitation can be significant, which just hammers home the need for defense in depth and super rapid patching once updates are available. And the fix, improved bounds checking, well, that's fundamental memory safety, like adding stricter guardrails to make sure data stays exactly where it's supposed to within ImageIO, stops those out-of-bounds writes.
Okay, and here's where it gets, well, really interesting for anyone managing Apple devices in an organization. The sheer range of devices and OS versions Apple patched in this emergency update is huge. We're not just talking the latest iPhone 16s or whatever. It's the whole ecosystem. So you've got iOS 18.6.2 and iPadOS 18.6.2, covering iPhone XS and later loads of iPads Pro, Air, Standard, Mini. But also, look, iPadOS 17.7.8 for older models like the 2nd Gen 12.9-inch iPad Pro, the 6th Gen iPad, and then on the Mac side, Interior 13.7.8, Sonoma 14.7.8, and even Sequoia 15.6.1. For IT teams listening, the key takeaway isn't just the number of patches, it's the breadth. This vulnerability clearly hit a wide range of your deployed Apple assets. Patching needs to be immediate and thorough.
Absolutely. The sheer breadth is the headline here. It really underscores that critical need for prompt, widespread patching across the entire ecosystem. For organizations, this isn't a minor task, right? It's an enterprise-wide effort, making sure every relevant device from the CEO's new MacBook Pro down to maybe some older iPads used in logistics or something gets updated. And it raises that important question for us in security. What does this broad impact really tell us about the ImageIO vulnerability itself? It strongly suggests the flaw was deep within a core shared component, not just a bug in some new feature, but something more fundamental, a coding error, maybe a design flaw that's persisted across multiple OS versions, which of course makes it a super attractive target for attackers looking for maximum reach. It shows that even in mature operating systems, these core libraries remain prime attack surfaces. One vulnerability can ripple across the whole product line.
So what does this all mean when we step back and look at the bigger picture? This latest 0-day CVE-2025-43300. It's clearly not just a one-off incident we patch and forget about. It feels like part of a larger and maybe more aggressive pattern we've been seeing this year with Apple, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, what's truly fascinating, or perhaps concerning, is that with this latest patch, Apple has now fixed a total of 7 0-days exploited in the wild just since the start of this year. 7. That's not just a number. It feels like a significant indicator, maybe a strategic shift by adversaries. That volume in this time frame suggests a more systematic, maybe even an industrialized approach to finding vulnerabilities by attackers targeting Apple. It forces us to reevaluate our trust assumptions. Beyond this latest one, CVE-2025-43300, the others this year were CVE-2025-24085, CVE-2025-43301, CVE-2025-30-200, CVE-2025-43001, and CVE 2025-43300. That's a pretty significant tally for any vendor, even one like Apple with a strong security reputation. It definitely signals consistent, high-level targeting.
And we should probably also mention the Safari vulnerability from last month, CVE 2025-6558. That one was interesting because it was tied to an open source component, right? And Google actually reported it being exploited in Chrome too.
Exactly. And if you connect that to this bigger picture, the trend of multiple 0 days hitting Apple, plus these cross-platform vulnerabilities like the Safari Chrome one, it tells you a lot about the adversaries. First, they're clearly investing heavily in finding and exploiting flaws in these really widely used high-value targets. Makes sense. The sophistication needed, especially for exploits that work across different systems or leverage common code, it suggests advanced capabilities. They're digging deep into foundational code bases, shared components. It hints at maybe shared research, perhaps shared tooling among different APT groups, or just a strategic focus by the big players on these common attack surfaces. So for us, our threat models really need to account for this broader capability. We need a more holistic view, maybe looking beyond just vendor-specific fixes to vulnerabilities in the whole software supply chain. And this cross-platform targeting, it fits nicely into those MITRE ATT and CK tactics like resource development and initial access, doesn't it? Shows they're constantly refining how they get that first foothold.
Okay, circling back just briefly to CVE 2025-43300 specifically, it's important we reiterate what we know it's being exploited. The actual attackers, the specific targets, that's not public knowledge right now, but the assessment holds. These attacks are likely weaponized as part of highly targeted attacks. So for our listeners in enterprise security, what does understanding this who and why really demand from our threat modeling and defense strategies?
Yeah, expanding on that, the profile of actors weaponizing these kinds of 0 days, it almost always points to state-sponsored groups, APTs, or those commercial spyware vendors we mentioned. The cost, the R&D required, it's huge. Far beyond your typical cybercriminal gang. They invest because the payoff is equally significant, usually intelligence gathering, surveillance, aimed squarely at those high-value targets we discussed, journalists, dissidents, politicians, execs. Understanding this who and why is absolutely vital for effective threat modeling. It tells you where to prioritize your defenses. Focus on identity and access for high-profile users, really robust endpoint detection and response, secure comms channels, maybe better isolation of critical data or systems. This isn't about stopping random malware. It's about anticipating the strategic moves of a dedicated, well-resourced adversary. You have to ask, how do our assets look from their perspective?
Exactly. And even if you or your organization don't think you're a direct target for, say, nation-state attacks, just understanding the sheer sophistication involved here is crucial. It forces all of us to develop more robust, more proactive security strategies, and it really makes you appreciate this relentless race between defenders and attackers. It's a constant reminder that security isn't static, right? It's this dynamic process needing continuous vigilance, continuous adaptation, especially against these kinds of potent threats. The lessons from these high-profile incidents, they really should inform your day-to-day architectural decisions, your security controls, patch management, incident response, even user training. It pushes us beyond just reacting. We need to be more proactive, more intelligence-driven in our defense. Okay, so as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's quickly recap the key takeaways. We dug into the specifics of the ImageIO 0-day, CVE 2025-43300, its pervasive nature in Apple's ecosystem, the high CVSS score, the insidious malicious image vector. Then we zoomed out, acknowledging this broader, pretty concerning pattern. 7 0 days patched by Apple just this year. That signals persistent, sophisticated targeting. And finally, we explore the critical who and why behind these attacks, usually high-value targets, nation-states, or similar actors, and what that means for your defense strategies and threat modeling.
Right. And maybe to leave you with a final provocative thought. Given this continuous stream of discovery and exploitation of 0 days, even in mature, widely used OSs like Apple's, what critical questions should we, as IT security pros, be asking about our strategic reliance on maybe single vendor ecosystems? And furthermore, what proactive, maybe architectural measures might be needed to build more genuinely resilient infrastructures, especially when these foundational components keep proving vulnerable to the most sophisticated attackers out there? Does this compel us to rethink defense in depth? Maybe prioritize more robust isolation or memory safety at an architectural level, or even push for greater diversification in critical areas? Something to think about.
Powerful questions indeed. For a complex and constantly shifting landscape, this isn't just about patching, it's anticipating the next move in a continuous game of digital chess. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Apple's latest 0 days. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on Vuln Vibes.